others. I have.
And I know that you are up to this task, thanks to Rosa's recent training, to drop down on the archers and dispose of them. Quietly. As you do so, our men, dressed in the Barbarigo uniforms we have captured, will move in from the alleyways around and take their places. Ezio pointed to the red mannequins within the warehouse walls. What about the guards inside? When you've dealt with the archers, we'll gather here. Antonio pointed to a piazza nearby which Ezio recognized as the one where Leonardo had his new workshop. He wondered briefly how his friend was progressing with his commissions, and discuss the next steps. "When do we make our move?" asked Ezio. "Tonight." "Excellent. Let me have a couple of good men. Ugo, Franco, are you with me?" The two nodded, grinning. "We'll take care of the archers and meet you as you suggest. With our men in place of their archers, they won't suspect a thing. And the next move? Once we've secured the warehouse, we'll launch an attack on the palazzo itself. But remember, be stealthy. They must not suspect a thing." Antonio grinned and spat. "Good luck, my friends. In bocca al lupo." He patted Ezio's shoulder. "Crepi il lupo," Ezio replied, spitting too. The operation passed off that night without a hitch. The Barbarigo archers didn't know what had hit them, and so subtly were they replaced with Antonio's men that the guards inside the warehouse fell quietly and without much resistance to the thieves' onslaught, having been unaware that their comrades outside had been neutralized. The attack on the palazzo was next on Antonio's agenda, but Ezio insisted that he went ahead first to assess the lie of the land. Rosa, the last stages of whose recovery had been remarkable thanks to the combined skills of Antonio and Bianca, and who could now climb and leap almost as well as if she had been back to her full fitness, wanted to accompany him, but Antonio, to her anger, vetoed this. It crossed Ezio's mind that Antonio, in the end, considered him more expendable than her, but he brushed off the thought and prepared himself for the reconnaissance mission, strapping on his left arm the Codex guard brace with its double dagger, and on his right the original spring blade. He had a lot of difficult climbing to do, and he didn't want to risk the poison blade since, in any circumstances, it was a truly lethal weapon, and he was keen to avoid any accident with it that might prove fatal to himself. Pulling his hood up over his head, and using the new techniques of upward leaping which Rosa and Franco had taught him, he stormed up the outer walls of the palazzo, silent as a shadow, and drawing less attention until he was on its roof and looking down into its garden. There he noticed two men in deep conversation. They were making for a side gate leading to a narrow private canal which led round the back of the palazzo. Following their progress from the roof, Ezio could see that a gondola was moored at a little jetty there, its two gondoliers clad in black and its lanterns doused. Sure-footed as a gecko on the roofs and walls, he hastened down and sheltered himself in the branches of a tree from which he could hear their conversation. The two men were Emilio Barbarigo and, as Ezio recognized with a shock, none other than Carlo Grimaldi, one of Doge Mocenigo's entourage. They were accompanied by Emilio's secretary, a spindly man dressed in grey, whose heavy reading glasses kept sliding down his nose. "Your little house of cards is crumbling, Emilio," Grimaldi was saying. "It's a minor setback, nothing more. The merchants who defy me and that piece of shit Antonio di Maggianis will soon be dead or in chains, or working the oars of a Turkish galley. I'm talking about the assassin. He's here, you know. That's what's made Antonio so bold. Look, we've all been robbed or burgled, and our guardsmen have been outsmarted. It's as much as I've been able to do to keep the Doge from poking his nose in. The assassin? Here? You numbskull, Emilio. If the master knew how stupid you are, you'd be dead meat. You know the damage he's already done to our cause in Florence and San Gimignano. Emilio made a fist of his right hand. I'll crush him like the bedbug he is, he snarled. Well, he's certainly sucking the blood out of you. Who knows if he's not here now, listening to us as we speak. Now, Carlo, you'll be telling me next you believe in ghosts. Grimaldi fixed him with his eyes. Arrogance has made you stupid, Emilio. You do not see the whole picture. You are nothing but a big fish in a small pond. Emilio grabbed him by the tunic and pulled him close, angrily. Venice will be mine, Grimaldi. I provided all the armaments to Florence. Not my fault if that idiot Jacopo didn't use them wisely. And don't try to make things bad for me with the master. If I wanted to, I could tell him some things about you, which would... Save your breath. I must go now. Remember, the meeting is set 10 days from now at San Stefano, outside Fiorella's. I'll remember, said Emilio sourly. The master will hear then how... The master will speak, and you will listen, retorted Grimaldi. Farewell. He stepped into the darkened gondola as Ezio watched, and it glided off into the night. Cazzo, muttered Emilio to his secretary as he watched the gondola disappear in the direction of the Grand Canal. What if he's right? What if that damned Ezio Auditore is here? He brooded for a moment. Look, get the boatmen ready, now! Wake the bastards up if you have to. I want those crates loaded now, and I want the boat ready in half an hour by your water clock. If Grimaldi is speaking the truth, I must find a place to hide, at least until the meeting. The master will find a way of dealing with the assassin. He must be working with Antonio di Magianis, put in the secretary. I know that, you idiot, hissed Emilio. Now come and help me pack the documents we spoke of before our dear friend Grimaldi came calling. They moved back towards the interior of the palazzo, and Ezio followed, giving away no more sense of his presence than if he had been a spirit. He blended into the shadows, and his footfall was no more noticeable than a cat's. He knew Antonio would hold off the attack on the palazzo until he gave the signal, and first he wanted to get to the bottom of what Emilio was up to. What were these documents of which he had spoken? Why won't people listen to sense? Emilio was saying to his secretary as Ezio continued to tell them. All this freedom of opportunity, it just leads to more crime. We must ensure that the state has control of all aspects of the people's lives, and at the same time give free rein to the bankers and the private financiers. That way, society flourishes. And if those who object have to be silenced, then that is the price of progress. The assassins belong to a bygone age. They don't realize that it's the state that matters, not the individual. He shook his head. Just like Giovanni Auditore, and he was a banker himself. You'd have thought he'd have shown more integrity. Ezio drew in his breath sharply at the mention of his father's name, but continued to pursue his quarry as Emilio and his secretary made their way to his office, selected papers, packed them, and returned to the little jetty by the garden gate where another, larger gondola was now awaiting its master. Emilio, taking his satchel of papers from his secretary, snapped a last order. Send some overnight clothes after me. You know the address. The secretary bowed and disappeared. There was no one else about. The gondoliers prepared to cast off, fore and aft. Ezio sprang from his vantage point onto the gondola, which rocked alarmingly. With two swift elbow movements, he knocked the boatman into the water, and then had Emilio by the throat. Guards! Guards! Gurgled Emilio, groping for the dagger at his belt. Ezio seized his wrists just as he was about to plunge the weapon into Ezio's belly. Not so fast, said Ezio. Assassin! You! Growled Emilio. Yes. I killed your enemy. That does not make you my friend. Killing me will solve nothing for you, Ezio. I think it will rid Venice of a troublesome bedbug, said Ezio, releasing his spring blade. Requiescat in pace. With barely a pause, Ezio eased the deadly steel between Emilio's shoulder blades. Death came quickly and silently. Ezio's proficiency in killing was matched only by the cold, metallic resolve with which he fulfilled the duty of his calling. Bundling Emilio's body over the gondola's side, Ezio set to rifling through the papers in his satchel. There was much to interest Antonio, he thought, as he swiftly sifted through them, for there was no time now to examine them thoroughly. But there was one parchment which caught his own attention, a rolled and sealed page of vellum, surely another codex page. As he was about to break the seal, shoof! An arrow rattled and clanged into the baseboard of the gondola between his legs. Instantly alert, Ezio crouched, peering up in the direction the missile had come from. High above him, on the ramparts of the palazzo, a vast number of Barbarigo archers was ranged. Then one of them waved, and acrobatically tumbled down from the high walls. In another second, she was in his arms. "Sorry, Ezio, foolish prank, but we couldn't resist." "Rosa!" She snuggled, back in the fray and ready for action. She looked at him with shining eyes. "And the Palazzo Seta is taken. We have freed the merchants who opposed Emilio, and we now control the district. Now, come. Antonio is planning a celebration, and Emilio's wine cellars are legendary." Time passed, and Venice seemed to be at peace. No one mourned Emilio's disappearance. Indeed, many believed him still to be alive, and some assumed he had just gone on a journey abroad to look after his business interests in the kingdom of Naples. Antonio made sure that the Palazzo Seta still ran like clockwork, and as long as the mercantile interests of Venice as a whole were not affected, nobody really cared about the fate of one businessman, however ambitious or successful he may have been. Ezio and Rosa had grown closer, but a fierce rivalry still existed between them. Now she was healed, she wanted to prove herself, and one morning she came to his rooms and said, "Listen, Ezio, I think you need a retune. I want to see if you're still as good as you became when Franco and I first trained you. So, how about a race?" "A race?" "Yes." "Where?" "From here to the Punta della Dogana, starting now!" And she leapt out of the window before Ezio could react. He watched her as she scampered over the red rooftops and seemed almost to dance across the canals that separated the buildings. Throwing off his tunic, he raced after her. At last they arrived, neck and neck, on the rooftop of the wooden building that stood on the spit of land at the end of the Dorso Duro, overlooking St. Mark's Canal and the lagoon. Across the water stood the low buildings of the monastery of San Giorgio Maggiore, and opposite, the shimmering pink stone edifice which was the Palazzo Ducale. "Looks like I won," said Ezio. She frowned. "Nonsense! Anyway, even by saying that, you show yourself to be no gentleman, and certainly no Venetian. But what can one expect of a Florentine?" She paused. "In any case, you are a liar. I won." Ezio shrugged and smiled. "Whatever you say, carissima." "Then, to the victor, the spoils," she said, pulling his head down to hers and kissing him passionately upon the lips. Her body now was soft and warm and infinitely yielding. 16. Emilio Barbarigo may not have been able to make the appointment in Campo San Stefano himself, but Ezio was certainly not going to miss it. He positioned himself in the already bustling square at dawn on that bright morning, late in 1485. The battle for ascendancy over the Templars was hard and long. Ezio began to believe that, as it had been for his father and was for his uncle, it would turn out to be his life's work too. His hood pulled up over his head, he melted into the crowd, but stayed close as he saw the figure of Carlo Grimaldi approaching with another man, ascetic-looking, whose bushy auburn hair and beard were ill-sorted with his bluish, pallid skin, and who wore the red robes of a state inquisitor. This, Ezio knew, was Silvio Barbarigo, Emilio's cousin, whose sobriquet was Il Rosso. He did not look in a particularly good mood. "Where is Emilio?" he asked impatiently. Grimaldi shrugged. "I told him to be here." "You told him yourself, in person?" "Yes," Grimaldi snapped back. "Myself, in person. I'm concerned that you don't trust me." "As am I," muttered Silvio. Grimaldi gritted his teeth at that, but Silvio merely looked around abstractedly. "Well, perhaps he'll arrive with the others. Let's walk a while." They proceeded to stroll around the large rectangular campo, past the church of San Vidal and the palaces at the Grand Canal end, up to San Stefano at the other, pausing from time to time to look at the wares the stallholders were setting out at the beginning of the day's trading. Ezio shadowed them, but it was difficult. Grimaldi was on edge and kept turning round suspiciously. At times it was all Ezio could do to keep his quarry within earshot. "While we're waiting, you can bring me up to date with how things are at the Doge's palace," said Silvio. Grimaldi spread his hands. "Well, to be honest with you, it's not easy. Mocenigo keeps his circle close. I have tried to lay the groundwork, as you asked, making suggestions in the interest of our cause, but of course I am not the only one vying for his attention, and old though he is, he's a canny bugger." Silvio picked up a complicated-looking glass figurine from a stall, inspected it, and put it back. "Then you must work harder, Grimaldi. You must become part of his inner circle." "I am already one of his closest and most trusted associates. It has taken me years to establish myself, years of patient planning, of waiting, of accepting humiliations." Yes, said Silvio impatiently. "But what have you to show for it?" "It's harder than I expected." "And why is that?" Grimaldi made a gesture of frustration. "I don't know. I do my utmost for the state. I work hard, but the fact is, Mocenigo doesn't like me." "I wonder why not," said Silvio coolly. Grimaldi was too absorbed in his thoughts to notice the snub. "It's not my fault. I keep trying to please the bastard. I find out what he most desires and lay it on for him. The finest jams from Sardinia, the latest fashions from Milan. Maybe the Doge just doesn't like sycophants." "Do you think that's what I am?" "Yes, a doormat, flatterer, a bootlicker. Need I go on?" Grimaldi looked at him. "Don't you insult me, Inquisitore. You haven't a clue what it's like. You don't understand the pressure in the—" "Oh, I don't understand the pressure." "No, you have no idea. You may be a state official, but I am 2 steps from the Doge almost every waking hour of the day. You wish you could be in my shoes because you think you could do better, but—" "Have you finished?" "No, just listen. I am close to the man. I have dedicated my life to establishing myself in this position, and I tell you I am convinced I can recruit Mocenigo to our cause." Grimaldi paused. "I just need a little more time." "It seems to me that you've had more than enough time already." Silvio broke off, and Ezio watched as he raised a hand to attract the attention of an expensively dressed elderly man with a flowing white beard, accompanied by a bodyguard who was the largest person Ezio had ever seen. "Good morning, cousin," the newcomer greeted Silvio. "Grimaldi." "Greetings, cousin Marco," replied Silvio. He looked around. "Where is Emilio? Did he not come with you?" Marco Barbarigio looked surprised, then grave. "Ah, then you have not yet heard the news." "What news?" "Emilio is dead." "What?" Silvio, as always, was irritated that his older and more powerful cousin should be better informed than he was. "How?" "I can guess," said Grimaldi bitterly. "The assassino." Marco looked at him sharply. "It is so. They pulled his body out of one of the canals late last night. It must have been in there for, well, long enough. They say he'd swollen up to twice his usual size. That's why he floated to the surface." Where can the assassin be hiding? Grimaldi said. We must find him and kill him before he does any more damage. He could be anywhere, said Marco. That is why I take Dante here everywhere with me. I wouldn't feel safe without him. He broke off. Why? He could be here, even now, for all we know. We must act fast, said Silvio. You're right, said Marco. But Marco, I'm so close I feel it. Just give me a few more days, Grimaldi pleaded. No, Carlo, you've had quite enough time. We no longer have the leisure for subtlety. If Mocenigo will not join us, we must remove him and replace him with one of our own, and we must do it this very week. The giant bodyguard, Dante, whose eyes had not ceased to scan the crowd from the moment he and Marco Barbarigo had arrived, now spoke. We should keep moving, signori. Yes, agreed Marco, and the master will be waiting. Come. Ezio moved like a shade among the crowds and the stalls, striving to keep the men within earshot as they crossed the square and made off down the street, which led in the general direction of St. Mark's Square. Will the master agree to our new strategy? Asked Silvio. He'd be a fool not to. You're right, we have no choice, Silvio agreed, then looked at Grimaldi. Which kind of makes you redundant, he added unpleasantly. This is a matter for the master to decide, retorted Grimaldi, just as he will decide whom to place in Mocenigo's shoes, you or your cousin Marco here, and the best person to advise him on that is me. I wasn't aware that there was a decision to be made, said Marco. Surely the choice is obvious to all. I agree, said Silvio edgily. The choice should fall on the person who organized the entire operation, the one who came up with the idea of how to save this city. Marco was quick to reply. I would be the last to undervalue tactical intelligence, my good Silvio, but in the end it is wisdom which one needs in order to rule. Do not think otherwise. Gentlemen, please, said Grimaldi. The master may be able to advise the Committee of 41 when they meet to elect the new Doge, but he cannot sway them. And for all we know, the master may be thinking of someone quite other than either of you. You mean yourself? Said Silvio incredulously, while Marco merely gave vent to a sneering laugh. And why not? I'm the one who's put in all the real graft. Signori, please, keep moving, put in Dante. It'll be safer for you all when we get back inside. Of course, agreed Marco, quickening his pace. The others followed suit. He's a good man, your Dante, said Silvio. How much did you pay for him? Less than he is worth, replied Marco. He's loyal and he's trustworthy. He saved my life on 2 occasions, but I wouldn't say he was exactly loquacious. Who needs conversation from a bodyguard? We're here, said Grimaldi, as they arrived at a discreet door in the side of a building off the Campo Santa Maria Zobenigo. Ezio, keeping a safe distance between them and himself, aware as he was of Dante's extreme vigilance, rounded the corner of the square just in time to see them enter. Looking round to ensure that the coast was clear, he climbed the side of the building and positioned himself on the balcony above the door. The windows to the room beyond were open, and within it, seated in a heavy oak chair behind a refectory table covered with papers and dressed in purple velvet, sat the Spaniard. Ezio dissolved into the shadows and waited, ready to listen to all that transpired. Rodrigo Borgia was in a filthy mood. Already the assassin had frustrated him in several major enterprises and escaped every attempt to kill him. Now he was in Venice and had eliminated one of the cardinal's principal allies there. And as if that wasn't enough, Rodrigo had had to spend the first 15 minutes of this meeting listening to the parcel of fools left in his service bickering about which of them should be the next Doge. The fact that he had already made his choice and greased the palms of all the key members of the Council of 41 seemed to have passed these idiots by, and his choice had fallen on the oldest, vainest, and most pliable of the 3. "Shut up, the lot of you," he finally spat out. "What I need from you is discipline and unwavering dedication to the cause, not this pusillanimous quest for self-advancement. This is my decision, and it will be carried out. Marco Barbarigo will be the next Doge, and he will be elected next week following the death of Giovanni Mocenigo, which, given that the man is 76 years old, will hardly raise an eyebrow, but which, nevertheless, must look natural. Do you think you are capable of arranging that, Grimaldi?" Grimaldi cast a glance at the Barbarigo cousins. Marco was preening, and Silvio was trying to look dignified in his disappointment. What fools they were, he thought. Doge or no Doge, they were still the puppets of the master, and the master was now conferring the real responsibility on him. Grimaldi allowed himself to dream of better things as he replied, "Of course, master." "When are you closest to him?" Grimaldi reflected. "I have the run of the Palazzo Ducale. Mocenigo may not like me much, but I do have his full confidence, and I'm at his beck and call most of the time." "Good. Poison him, at the first opportunity. He has food tasters." "Good God, man, do you think I don't know that? You Venetians are supposed to be good at poisoning. Get something into his meat after they've tasted it, or stick something into that Sardinian jam they tell me he's so fond of. But think of something, or it'll be the worse for you." "Leave it to me, Sua Altezza." Rodrigo turned his irritable gaze on Marco. "I take it you can lay your hands on a suitable product for our purpose?" Marco smiled deprecatingly. "That is rather my cousin's area of expertise." "I should be able to lay my hands on enough cantarella for our purposes," said Silvio. "And what is that?" "It's the most effective form of arsenic, and it is very difficult to trace." "Good. See to it." "I must say, Maestro," said Marco, "we are lost in admiration that you should associate yourself personally so closely with this enterprise. Is that not dangerous for you? The assassin will not dare come after me. He is clever, but he will never outwit me. In any case, I feel inclined to involve myself more directly. The Pazzi disappointed us in Florence. I hope sincerely that the Barbarigi will not do the same." He glowered at them. Silvio snickered. "The Pazzi were a bunch of amateur—" "The Pazzi," Rodrigo interrupted him, "were a potent and venerable family, and they were brought to their knees by one young assassin. Do not underestimate this troublesome foe, or he will bring the Barbarigi down too." He paused to let that sink in. "Now go and get this done. We cannot afford another failure." "What are your own plans, master?" "I return to Rome. Time is of the essence." Rodrigo rose abruptly and left the room. From his vantage point, hidden on the balcony, Ezio watched him leave alone and cross the square, causing a flock of pigeons to scatter as he strode in the direction of the Molo. The other men soon followed him, separating and taking their own paths out of the square. When all was silent, he leapt down to the flagstones beneath and hurried off in the direction of Antonio's headquarters. Once there, he was met by Rosa, who greeted him with a lingering kiss. "Put your dagger back in its sheath," she smiled, as their bodies pressed together. "You're the one who made me draw it. And you're the one," he added knowingly, "with its sheath." She took his hand. "Come on, then." "No, Rosa, mi dispiace veramente, but I can't." "So, you tired of me already?" "You know it isn't that, but I have to see Antonio. It's urgent." Rosa looked at him and saw the intense expression on his face, in his cold, blue-gray eyes. "Okay, for this once, I forgive you. He's in his office. I think he misses that model of the Palazzo Seta now that he's got the real thing. Come." "Ezio," said Antonio as soon as he saw him. "I don't like that look. Is everything all right?" "I wish it was. I've just discovered that Carlo Grimaldi and the two Barbarigi cousins, Silvio and Marco, are in league with a man I know too well, whom people call the Spaniard. They plan to murder Doge Mocenigo. and replace him with one of their own. That is terrible news. With their own man as Doge, they'll have the entire Venetian fleet and trade empire in their grasp. He paused. And they call me a criminal. So, you'll help me stop them? Antonio extended his hand. You have my word, little brother, and the support of all my men. And women, put in Rosa. Ezio smiled. Grazie, amici. Antonio looked thoughtful. But, Ezio, this will take some planning. The Palazzo Ducale is so strongly defended that it makes the Palazzo Seta look like an open park. And we don't have time for me to have a scale model built so we can plan. Ezio held up his hand and said firmly, Nothing is impenetrable. The two of them looked at him. Then Antonio laughed, and Rosa smiled naughtily. Nothing is impenetrable? No wonder we like you, Ezio.